Wow, it looks like the Raiders are about to make a quarterback change.
Could that mean anything going forward? Or is it still Gardner still the guy?
Raiders head coach Antonio Pierce was asked about the offensive struggles, and he was also asked about his viral comments, which threw Raiders players under the bus, and surprisingly, he did not back down. This has gone absolutely viral. You have Adam Schefter picking this up, Ian Rappaport picking this up. We'll get into what Antonio Pierce said, but Raiders head coach Antonio Pierce told reporters that he's not ruling out a quarterback change this week. And let me just tell you, when you say something like that, when you're asked about the quarterback position and you don't just support your starting guy, that kind of shows right away that you're about to make a change. And it's quite odd because the Raiders had a quarterback competition throughout all of preseason, and Antonio Pierce back then said whoever is named the starter is going to be their guy. They're going to roll with him. They're going to rally behind him. And little did a lot of people know, a lot of people didn't notice this, but Gardner Minshew, when he was named the starting quarterback and played in that week 1 game against the LA Chargers, Gardner Minshew had the C on his chest. He is technically a captain on this team, so making a quarterback change is going to be absolutely huge. We first thought maybe this could be a possibility when Antonio Pierce put in Aidan O'Connell at the end of the game against the Carolina Panthers, when the Raiders got absolutely smoked by the Carolina Panthers. Yes, they were down 2 touchdowns. There was a little bit of time left, like less than 5 minutes. He decided to put Aidan O'Connell in there, and he never really gave a clear answer as to why. He just wanted to see if that gave them a spark, if it changed anything. But if Gardner Minshew is your guy, obviously you're not going to look for a spark elsewhere. You're going to continue rolling with your dude, and the only time you'd put in a backup is to save your starting quarterback for health reasons. But instead, it seems like he was looking for a spark, and it seems like he may have gotten that spark because today, on Monday, he was asked if there's a possibility that he could make a change at quarterback, or is Gardner Minshew the guy? Here's what he said.
Could that mean anything going forward? Or is it still Gardner still the guy?
I think we got to give it the players and just evaluate everything from yesterday first.
So he is specifically asked by a reporter, is Gardner Minshew still the guy? And he says, oh, we're going to evaluate this, get the players together and evaluate it. That's what he says at the very end of the press conference. National media is picking this up because they probably know a change is imminent. And honestly, I don't think this is going to help the Raiders at all whatsoever. I think Gardner Minshew is somewhat of a scapegoat here. The Raiders literally have the worst run game in the entire NFL. It's not even close. Austin Gale, former PFF, said the Raiders are averaging negative a half a point EPA per rush attempt, which is tied for the worst of any team in the first 3 weeks in this millennium, basically since the year 2000. That means that the Raiders literally lose a half a point every time they run the football. And Antonio Pierce in the press conference today said that the Raiders have the worst rushing attack in the entire NFL.
We are where we are now, worst running teams in football, and that's not something I'm proud of, our staff is not proud of, and I'm sure our team is not.
Antonio Pierce has also not been shy about criticizing the offensive coordinator that he hired this year, Luke Getsy. He has been throwing him under the bus. He's been criticizing the scheme, criticizing the strategy and line of attack. And it seems like, yes, maybe Gardner Minshew could be better. Obviously, he's a journeyman QB who has historically been a backup quarterback. But when you have literally the worst rushing attack in the NFL, what is Gardner Minshew exactly supposed to work with? The Raiders have also had problems on their offensive line. Obviously, if you can't run the ball, you can't run block, and they've struggled in pass blocking. Gardner Minshew has gotten sacked a number of times. He's usually under pressure, and in my opinion, some of the Raiders' best plays, especially against the Baltimore Ravens when they won, are when Gardner Minshew uses his legs and extends plays and makes a completion or makes a scramble here and there. So obviously a QB change means that Aidan O'Connell would be the guy who comes in. I don't see how that's going to make anything better. Yeah, it may give you a spark if you keep the defense guessing as to who's going to start the following week. Maybe it'll give you a bump, a little motivation bump, but I think eventually it's going to come back down to reality, and we're going to see Aidan O'Connell for who he is, which is a backup. And there's nothing wrong with being a backup quarterback, but that is his ceiling in the NFL. That was his ceiling when he entered the NFL draft, and that is why he did not beat out Gardner Minshew during the preseason for this quarterback job. When you're looking at the numbers yesterday, you could technically say Aidan O'Connell had some better numbers, only 3 incompletions, 0 interceptions. He did have a drop pick, by the way. For those of you who watched the game, you probably remember that. Gardner Minshew did have an interception, but it seemed like an interception when him and Davante Adams were on different pages. They were not on the same page, and it seemed like they each were running a different play. But Gardner Minshew, 18 of 28 when you can't run the ball over 200 yards. I think the team could be better. I think the scheme could be better. But to say that quarterback is the main problem and making this change is going to solve everything, to me, seems like a desperate move, a desperation move, and a way to really avoid the problem, which is the coaching staff and the scheme as a whole being unable to strategize against their opponents on a weekly basis. And when you're unable to blame the coaching staff as a whole, when you're unable to blame yourself as a head coach, what do you typically do? You come after the players. Now, Pierce, to his credit, has given some shade towards the coaching staff on the offensive side of the football and has said that the head coaches could be better. But he was asked about his viral comments, which went absolutely viral over the weekend, just this last night. We're going to get into what some of the NFL insiders have said about it. He was asked about this, where he said, hey, some players were making business decisions, not giving their full effort. And he did not regret saying this. He did not regret airing out the Raiders' dirty laundry openly in front of everybody. He doubled down.
Obviously, a lot was made of that comment, national media-wise this morning. I guess if you think about it, are you happy that you pointed it out?
I don't bite my tongue. I don't bite my tongue.
So he doesn't bite his tongue. I don't know, man. I don't know if that's going to make a lot of players happy when you're basically coming out there, coming after guys, saying they're not giving maximum effort. That's why you have people like Pat McAfee talking about this viral moment from Antonio Pierce and saying that it's never a good look.
That is a very slanderous thing to say to somebody. Oh, we're making business decisions out here. That's a big punch right to the balls.
Now, there has been a lot of speculation as to who Antonio Pierce could be talking about. Is he talking about Jack Jones? There's some speculation there. This is a guy who's good friends, longtime friends with Antonio Pierce, and you have this play of him not giving great effort on a tackle here. I'm not sure what moment of the game this was in. Was this the first quarter, fourth quarter, probably late in the game, but Jack Jones obviously not having some maximum effort here. Antonio Pierce was asked if he was talking about Jack Jones. Here's what he had to say.
In particular, have any problem with Jack Jones's effort in the game?
I had a problem with our entire defense and effort.
So Pierce is trying to be a little more strategic here by not just giving it all up who he's talking about. There's some speculation that maybe he's talking about Davante Adams. I thought Davante Adams showed good effort throughout the game, but you had some fans thinking, hey, was Davante Adams taking it easy once the Raiders were out of it? I don't really blame players taking it easy when you're down by over 20 points against the Carolina Panthers well into the fourth quarter. I think it's kind of smart. I think it's kind of practical considering the fact that it's week 3 into the season and you have 14 more games to go, right? You got your bye week and then 14 more additional games. You probably want to stay healthy for those games. So a quarterback change seems imminent, but what was the biggest problem for the Raiders last night against Andy Dalton, who absolutely carved them up? Well, it was the defensive side of the football. Andy Dalton had 21 points, 3 touchdowns at halftime. And I'm not going to sit here and blame Patrick Graham, the defensive coordinator. Patrick Graham, the defensive coordinator, is one of the highly sought after defensive coordinators in the entire NFL. Other teams actually tried to interview him and pluck him away from the Raiders this past offseason, and the Raiders blocked it. So the Raiders know how valuable this guy is. They knew that he could possibly leave their team, so they made sure he could not interview elsewhere. And they have the rights to do that since they have the rights to his contract. Well, the Raiders, in terms of yards per allowed per game this year, are 29th. 29th. That is literally the 4th worst in the NFL. Obviously, you have the Rams and the Niners there as well in some of the top 4 worst defenses in terms of giving up yards per allowed, right? Yards per play allowed. But the Niners went up against the hot Minnesota Vikings, the LA Rams just this past week, and Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets in week 1. Rams have obviously played the Lions and the Niners and also the Arizona Cardinals. So both of these teams have had tough opponents, not the Carolina Panthers, not the LA Chargers, who are a low-scoring team, and not the Baltimore Ravens, who have been struggling this year. So I wonder what's happening with this defense. Max Crosby has been dealing with injuries. He's playing with a high ankle sprain. Maybe he should not be playing. And really, I think people and fans in particular have been overestimating this Raiders defensive roster outside of the front seven, outside of the defensive line. I think they played with extra motivation last year after Josh McDaniels, but really it was Patrick Graham doing a lot with not that much talent on that side of the football. The Raiders also didn't use much draft capital on the defense this past year. They spent the first 2 picks on offense. And honestly, I don't think Antonio Pierce is taking responsibility for these L's and for this collapse this year. He's pointing fingers at the players, saying that, hey, some people are making business decisions. And he's also pointing fingers at Luke Getsy, the inability to run the football. He's pointing fingers at the offensive coordinator that he chose. And he also made a lot of decisions on this coaching staff. He had a great person, Zach, pointing this out. DeAndre Pierce, the son of Antonio Pierce, is a offensive assistant for the Las Vegas Raiders. We almost forgot about that, but Antonio Pierce even has his own family's hands on this offense. Does he take any responsibility for the struggles of this offense, or is it all on Luke Getsy? Hey, DeAndre Pierce is part of that coaching staff too. Now, look, I do agree with Antonio Pierce. Luke Getsy does deserve his criticism, but I think making this quarterback change is going to be the wrong move. You're already creating some weird turmoil in the locker room. You seem indecisive and fickle by switching out the quarterback after originally saying that this guy, Gardner Minshew, was going to be the guy for the entire year. And I don't think switching the quarterback makes the Raiders offense run the football better, block better, call better plays, scheme better against their opponents. I don't think that's going to do any of that. And with these radical personnel decisions, I think you're going to have certain players in the future look at the Raiders, especially if they're ran by Antonio Pierce, and think, wow, I don't know if I want to sign up to play quarterback there. The guy might say I'm the franchise quarterback 1 week, and then 3 weeks into the season, even though nothing's really entirely my fault, I might get benched. Even though we can't run the football and the coaching staff is heavily criticized. My name is Willie. Subscribe for more content from me. Peace out, and I hope you have a good one.